results that we've been doing. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Yeah. So as mentioned, the goal of AURORAL is to deliver interoperable, open, and secure integrated digital platforms. So as you can see here, I don't know if you can see my...
We can see the slides.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So you have a set of vertical services and tools at the bottom, which can be thought of as data providers or services. And then at the top, we have a set of horizontal services and marketplaces that want to utilize data from these data providers in some way. It can be mobility as a service applications, energy operations, smart health applications. It doesn't really matter, but the main point here is that in order to do this, there needs to be interoperability between the data provided and those using it. And that is the role of the AURORAL middleware, which offers interoperability as a service. And the way this is done is through the use of what is called AURORAL nodes, which I'll get into now. So an AURORAL node is a software component that bridges data sources and services to the AURORAL network. These nodes are run by the data providers and service providers themselves in their own premises or virtual servers, and are then registered to the AURORAL network using the W3C Web of Things thing descriptions in order to provide an interoperable description. The AURORAL middleware also provides privacy policies and access through a web interface called the Neighborhood Manager, which allows you control to say who should be able to access the data that you provide. This data is exchanged across the AURORAL nodes using something called the AURORAL core ontology. And this mapping is done by the node adapters, which you can see at the bottom of this figure. So the Smart Hub would be the service that provides the actual data. The data is fed through the adapters to the agent, which can then feed it out to other nodes that can request the data, or the AURORAL middleware as such. The AURORAL middleware or the AURORAL system itself does not hold any data. That means that the data is still kept at the service or data providers for their own convenience. And the network traffic is simply done through the nodes using a simple XMPP network. Yeah, so that is the quick basic overview of how the AURORAL platform works. You have a set of nodes that implements an interface to map the data to a reference ontology in order to provide interoperability. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, just ask now or send me an email or something and I can follow up.
Thank you, Bart, for your presentation. Indeed, it was quite useful to understand how the middleware works. It's also important for external stakeholders, let's say, to start familiarizing with it. So thanks a lot. And yeah, if you have any question, you can raise your hand or type it in the chat. In the meantime, I would gladly give the floor to Tore. I see he's ready perhaps for the second part of the presentation. So the floor is yours.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Just try to share my my screen. Okay, right, you can see it. Hopefully.
Yes, now we can see it.
Yeah, fine. So okay, so this is the actual innovations gaps that we found. It can be sort of divided in two. It's the general gaps that we find from from investigating the literature reviews, from looking at all the different services that are available out there, and through this there are more like this general gaps, and then we have this more specific gaps that AURORAL brings. So AURORAL in itself also have some gaps related to this. So it will be more clear, I think, when we go through the presentation. I will go through it for each of the domains we have looked at. We have looked at 7 domains. It's the same domains that we that is in the annotation protocol that Marcos mentioned. So okay. Yeah. Nope. First domain is it's the smart health. And what do we find? Well, first of all, there is a need for more research in this area, which is specifically to understand the user and the aspects of the technology. So how the users use or are familiar with the technology, I would say, and specifically when we talk about health, it's like elderly care, and we all know that elderly people are not particularly well used to technology. So trying to find out more about how the users understand the technology is very important. It's also said that loneliness and isolation amongst older people is a problem that can be solved by technology. Now, this statement is, I would say, it's a bit not probably true in my mind, because at least in Norway we have a lot of discussions lately about elderly care, and specifically, I think there are people realizing that technology by itself cannot solve loneliness problems. You need people, actually. And the third one is cybersecurity, which is in general underdeveloped, and security is very important for this health sector. And then we have suggestions. Suggestions is more like what can we do from a role? What are we missing in a role? What can we how can we solve this? And I think what we see is that we need to use IoT devices more. We have some, at least in I think in Autesho has some use of IoT in ambient assisted living, but we would like to see some more of it. We should try to demonstrate the synergies also between ambient assisted living services and other domains. For instance, smart governance and smart mobility and logistics. And this is because elderly people, they also need transport. So we can use some of the data that we gather from this AEL service can be used to plan logistics services as well. And also artificial intelligence is not very dominating in this domain. Yeah, and in fact, it's not very highlighted in AURORAL at all, but we'll come back to that. Yeah, smart farming, no. Smart farming, next. Next domain. What we see there is a lack of policies. And to give an example for this, it's we have, for instance, landowners or different stakeholders. Landowners are one of them, managers and farmers. So that 3 different stakeholders, and they don't necessarily have the same ideas or the same thoughts. So this is something that should be solved, because there's a problem. Who actually owns the data? Is it the landowner, or is it the manager, or is it the farmer? So And I think one of our use cases, which we have in Spain, Catalonia, in particular, knows this or have experienced this problem. And another thing we find is that there's a need for more research on what we call precise climate prediction, which is also important for this agricultural production. And one way of doing this is to use drones. Drones is one of the technologies that we actually have in AURORAL, and that we maybe can utilize better. I believe drones is one technology that will become much more important in the future. And it's can be used particularly well in smart farming, as well as also IoT and artificial intelligence. So perhaps more use cases showing the use of IoT and drones would be good. Sorry, I have some problems to change this the screens. Smart energy. What we find in this domain is that the use of big data is generally underdeveloped. And in AURORAL, we can perhaps try to utilize this by promoting AI and big data services, as well as all the other domains. Another finding is that the environmental sustainability aspect is sort of as very positive for users. It's a positive case, but sometimes this is outperformed by concerns related to privacy and security, because privacy and security is also very very important. And sometimes, although they may think of a service as very environmental friendly, they have fears about privacy and security. As well as for the other domains, we believe drones is particularly useful in these domains. It's particularly for flying and investigating, for instance, windmills and power grids, perhaps other things as well. And I think the smart energy services could be combined with services from other domains to save energy and to, let's say, utilize the potential fully. So it's a combination of try to combine with other services. Next domain, smart mobility and logistics. This is a domain that is very well represented in AURORAL, but I think we need to show how the municipalities can utilize the data from this domain when they plan for the future. And this can be done in many ways, obviously. And it's also stated that there is actually a lack of pilot studies in these domains. There are a lot of services, but there are not so many very good pilot studies that can show or lead the way forward. So our suggestion here is to try to show the synergies between this logistics domain and other domains. And for instance, if we already talked about transport for elderly people, and mobility can be combined with many other domains. Tourists, for instance, tourism is one of them, because tourists also need transport and so on. So there's a potential here that we should try to utilize better. Tourism, next domain. One important thing is that cognitive and affective factors are important for tourists when they make their decisions. And this is an area where we need some more research. This is like a general gap. I think for AURORAL, smart tourism is also a domain that is well covered. We have several use cases in smart tourism. But I think we would like to see the use of IoT devices more. It's the service that we have are more it's like services, platform services to try to show the service, but that we don't use the devices very much. And also two-way communication between users and the attractions would be nice to have. And again, this is something that may also affect the cognitive ways for the tourists and can be important. So two-way communication we would like to see. Smart governance. This is also a domain where we would like to see more two-way communication between municipalities and inhabitants. Because today municipalities, they have their websites and so on, but it's more a one-way communication. It's not so much two ways. And there's a potential. And I think this is especially relevant in the rural areas because having a very good relationship between municipalities and inhabitants is, I think it's probably more important in rural areas than in cities. And of course, integration from other services is important, and it's possible to use data from other services in other domains to create new services within the smart government domain. And it's very valuable. And then one example is that, for instance, in the tourism domain, we were able to see where the tourists are. We are able to see what they do, and this is very important. For instance, for municipalities to plan the maintenance and so on and so on. So trying to utilize this better would be very good. And the last domain is smart industry. This is the domain where we don't find much services in general. For rural, we have identified one. It's in Piedmont. It's about streamlining or the dairy production. And this is also a domain where IoT is particularly well suited. But what we see is that although there are services or factories utilizing IoT to enhance or their productions, these are services that are mainly profitable for the industry itself. It's not like a public service. It's not very clear how this can benefit the people or the municipalities or whatever. So this is probably what we would like to see, is that how can we show how these services can benefit the inhabitants and the municipalities. So this is something that we probably would like to see more of. And then finally, these are just some general comments and summary. Marketplaces, I have not talked much about marketplaces, but marketplaces are important for rural. It's cross sectoral domain. It's can be used for other domains, many domains, and this calls for new business models and new opportunities that we should try to exploit as much as possible. Cybersecurity, already mentioned, this is generally underdeveloped, particularly for smart health and smart governance. And we should try to strive for the open use of data, and then at the same time take the cybersecurity into consideration. And as I mentioned already, I think we should have more use of devices, IoT devices, drones, maybe other type of devices, cameras, positioning devices, and so on. And we should try to use or to demonstrate the use of artificial intelligence and big data much more than we do now. So I think that was basically the most important ones, at least. So if you have any questions, please.
Indeed. Thank you, Tore, very much for this complete overview on the domains that we are analyzing within the AURORAL project, as well as the innovation gaps that are concerning such domains. I think some examples will come from the pitches that we have later, but I think that, for instance, for the smart industry domain, let's say a dedicated event would be useful, but not maybe there are examples of other uses of IoT from the industrial perspective, but there is a whole, let's say, discussion around ownership of data when it comes to for instance, industries, especially the manufacturing sector, which is, yes, highly digitalized, we can say, in some areas, but when it comes to sharing data, there are still some issues. So we might think of a dedicated event on that. But for the rest, yeah, you said it all. What I will do now is to, of course, taking questions at this point. If anyone has a feedback, a remark, or a comment, or I will continue by presenting you some of the results that we had within the first actually innovation workshops that we organized in this context. It was organized last year in Alentejo. I will present you, like, very shortly some of the results and some of the recommendations that we got from both the AURORAL partners and from an Hungarian and Romanian hubs that deal with smart cities and smart communities implementation policies. So let's say that the topics that were discussed, as well as the recommendations, were quite, let's say, general. So we are not going to tackle technical settings at this point, because we will have, this session later. So I will give you really like a general bite of what we discussed. But in case there is a link to, read the whole report, in case you are interested. So what came out from the discussion in Alentejo was, first of all, the importance of having an extended ecosystem where both public administrations and local companies can work together with citizens as well, to ensure both democratic participation, but also to ensure that those digital solutions are truly have truly like a purpose. So they are going to somehow tackle a gap that is actually happening in the specific local community. And related to what Tore was saying about smart governance, that is quite important, let's say, to have this communication with the citizens, is indeed quite important, because one of the biggest challenges that the partners identified were indeed referring to the fact of communicating the added value of deploying a digital service in a specific small, perhaps, community in a remote area. So communication wise, there's really a lot of work to do, and it's good that also Tore mentioned it as something like lacking from a technology point of view. Some let's say recommendations that came out from the discussion at the workshop were let's say, definition of an appropriate level of necessity and demand. Of course, each local community has different needs, different perceptions, and also, of course, different cultures that need to be included in the reasoning when deploying a digital service. So let's remember that that it doesn't exist, or it's, let's say, it's not the best approach is not for sure one size fits all. So it's really important to understand the specific needs of the community you are going to work with. Then another point that I'd like to mention is that an island-like development is preferred. This relates to the first point I just mentioned. So it's important to leverage local traditional advantages and strengths to be able to really create an inclusive digitalization, digital transformation of the community. And then, of course, the importance of competencies. So there cannot be a digital transition if there are no people able to work or even interact with the digital applications. So it's not just a matter of the, let's say, professionals working in the field, but it's also a matter of citizens, of having citizens with the right competencies, because they need to be able to interact with the services, to be able to provide feedback, for instance, and constantly improve the services, and as a result, the quality of living in the community. So AURORAL will also have a kind of academy. This is just a mention that that I thought of reading these recommendations. So we will also provide, let's say, some trainings, some basic trainings to the audience to be able, to use the middleware and how to integrate the services. And yes, this point refers to the first, let's say, recommendation I mentioned. So the importance of having an extended ecosystem, which is really, really inclusive of all the stakeholders that are part of the community. Still related to the ecosystem, to a larger ecosystem, there is the importance of a validation process. So every time you integrate a digital solution, a digital service, you need the validation by all stakeholders, meaning citizens, public administrations, companies, and everyone involved in the process. And of course, also monitoring process is essential to understand what perhaps is not going well, what can be improved, and try to anticipate possible risks. The third point relates somehow to what we have underlined in the Alentejo protocol. So there is not a unique smart city concept or definition, but it's better to refer to this digital transformation of our territories as a smart territory or smart community. So it's better to use this kind of words when referring to this process of transformation, and this is what we have tried to define in the Alentejo protocol. So we have tried to define what does it mean a smart community, and which are the smart domains that should be included in a community to be able to become smart. One of the main challenges that were identified during the workshop were indeed that smart projects sometimes remain isolated or managed by one department in the public administration responsible for the rolling out of the project. Possible solutions that came out from the best practices presented in Romania and in Hungary were somehow to think of the needs of the citizen and a very user-friendly administration and public services to be able to communicate with the citizens. Then this is something for public authorities. Specifically, they need to foster coordinated and holistic problem solving. So let's try to avoid, let's say, silos when it comes to thinking of solutions or possible deployment of digital services. So let's not think in silos, but let's think of a holistic approach and an integrated approach with all the departments and all the ministries, for instance, that might be somehow interested in a given solution. And here comes the fourth point, the fourth recommendation. So to ensure the efficiency of collaboration and dialogue among different structures in the public administration. This is really important if you really want a digital project to be successful in your community. Of course, there's also a lack of innovation policies, so the policymakers are also invited to reflect on it, and actually this is something that is being done at European level, and it's something we are quite much involved with our focus group. So we always try to propose policy recommendations to improve policy frameworks where smart community stakeholders can actually operate and foster innovation through this collaboration with the public administration. The third main challenge that was identified in the workshop, as mentioned before, is a lack of specialized digital skills in both public servants and citizens. So a lot of European programs actually are investing on that. There are a lot of trainings available for smart cities and smart community operators. Not only for, let's say, IT specialists, as I was saying before, but also for instance, managerial positions or more entrepreneurial positions at executive levels. It's important that each and every one of us has the right set of competencies to understand what is going on and to understand how these digital technologies actually affect our everyday life. This is also quite important and crucial when it comes to cybersecurity, and to understand which are also the risks when interacting with digital technologies, so that we can avoid dangerous or harmful situations. Some of the obstacles also that were identified when it comes to the specific deployment of digital solutions in rural area were already mentioned before. This is somehow a summary of what has been said so far. So it's quite tricky to share the added value of the digital service with the local citizens, as they, seem to look at these services as an external somehow imposition, like a top-down approach. So it's really important that the approach to the deployment of digital services is bottom up. So always include the citizens, try to include the citizens in the innovation process. And of course, as a consequence, like the lack of communication among technical and operational partners is also an important obstacle, to the deployment of digital solutions, because IT specialists and people in the managing level need to communicate, so they need to understand each other quite well, and this requires a massive, let's say, upskilling and reskilling effort. These are other recommendations that came out from the discussion on what we just said. So to create, for instance, a discussion forum where you give citizens the opportunity to speak up. And also it is important to identify the added values at the design phase already. And then, of course, like the third recommendation, it seems, obvious, but it's not. So create and invest on, let's say, visual material to explain to citizens mainly and specifically these technical specifications and the digital solution you would like to deploy, because visual, let's say that visual material is way more impactful when, let's say, the people don't have the right competencies to understand such complex technical specifications. So this was just a sneak peek, let's say, from the discussion we had last year. I'm going to share with you the presentation with all the links where you can find the whole report of the first workshop. But now I really would like to give the floor to the external companies, because I'm really curious to see what they are doing, and to inspire also the project and the partners in the project with their solutions and with their use of IoT sensors, data, and so on. So the first speaker of today is Harris Moisiadis. Sorry if it's not pronounced well. He is the business development manager at Future Intelligence. I'm not going to make much spoilers because he's going to talk about its business and what they are doing, and perhaps if you can already somehow align with what has been said by Tore in the presentation, that would be awesome. So I see the presentation already. The floor is yours, and thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Thank you for the invitation to be here in this very nice workshop. I hope you hear me well. So I'm Haris Moisiadis. I'm the business development manager, the business architect of Future Intelligence, especially in the agri-food, environment, and bioeconomy domains. Future Intelligence offers IoT sensors and actuator controllers and end-to-end solutions for the digital transformation of the rural economy, among others. We were founded in 2009 by three telecom and information systems engineers. Now we are close to 30 people, a bit more. We are pretty active in three countries, in Greece, Cyprus, and United Kingdom. We follow intensively the R&D domain of the European Commission and our national instruments, including the national policies, innovation policies of the other two countries that we are part of. And we have already, of course, commercial solutions offering them to end users like citizens or farmers or industries. And yeah, I'm going to talk a bit more about this later on. So our activities are centered around IoT. And of course, they touch all other relevant areas like AI, cybersecurity, edge computing, and of course, open source data middleware or data lakes that can ensure the biggest challenge, let's say, of the technology nowadays, which is interoperability of systems, no vendor lock-ins, etc. As I said, we are pretty active in two market verticals as we at least internally define them, which is agri-food and the relevant domains like environment, circular economy, etc., and infrastructure that includes renewable energy sources and parks of PV or wind turbines parks, industries, motorways. This is how we define infrastructure, at least internally. And what we do, we design and deliver hardware and software, and we have some other dedicated service like consulting in aviation or in energy, providing reports that are needed in order for these parks or for these projects to be to get the required permissions by at least the Greek state. This is a quick image of some of the customers or partners that we have in both domain, infrastructure and agri-food. We are active in several places around EU, and this is a bit outdated. Italy is one of these as well, as Poland and some other countries. In terms of the software, what we provide is FINOT platform. FINOT stands for Future Intelligence Answer on the IoT era, which is an end-to-end IoT and data ecosystem platform. This means that we can virtualize any physical object that will be later deployed in the physical sphere, like sensors, light controllers, things like that. And what it does is, of course, it enables the remote management and monitoring of infrastructures and applications. The Finot platform is based on FireWare Orion context broker that uses NCSI as a protocol, as a standard protocol. Of course, it is a platform that uses standards across all layers in the software or in the hardware part. We're gonna see some of them later on. And because we are pretty active with FireWare since 2015, we have recently set up a local hub that tries to promote the use of FireWare in other fellow technology providers, research centers, and of course, also we promote the use of open source standard in end users like municipalities, farmers, etc. I'm gonna give you a quick overview of the hardware that we also provide. First of all, is a Finot weather station that has applications in agri-food and in infrastructure for various and different reasons. As I said, we don't build the sensors, but we build the sensor controller, this black box in the center of at the center of this slide. And as I said, the projects that we have deployed this device includes cooperatives, vineyards, aromatic plant holders, and of course motorways or other use cases like universities. We provide these stations to universities, and they build their dedicated software platform application, let's say, on top of it. We provide a standardized API, and then they get this data and feed another dedicated platform. Markets include cities, regions, ports, hospital, marinas, renewable energy source parks, and there are some advantages that I'm not specifically mentioned right now. Another device is the custom stations, custom IoT stations that we provide. So they are a bit more affordable as solutions comparing to a weather station. And of course, it covers some dedicated needs like monitoring the soil conditions or monitoring the liquid conditions inside a fertilization tank or in hydroponic substrates, etc. Indicative projects include agri-food stakeholders, but of course we can discuss, I mean, the platform, the tools that we use have the power to integrate any sensor, almost any sensor that is commercially available, because exactly of the use of standards that we make, industry standards and well adopted one. Then we move to irrigation controllers. This device can control the application of water in green spaces in cities or in villages and smart islands. Of course, in agriculture premises, in agri-food premises, in greenhouses, etc. And yeah, some specific advantages also come with this solution. Last, I'm gonna briefly talk about the industrial IoT Edge gateway that we provide. This supports open industrial protocols, and in simple terms, it can connect different systems. It can get information from different SCADA systems, for example, and upload them on the internet, where various and different stakeholders with different protocols and access policies can have access to it. And we have deployed this device in various research projects mainly, and in various production lines. I will briefly talk about how we approach the research framework. internally in our company. So we have three main pillars. We follow R&D projects in order to create references. So not much alterations in our current devices occur there. Then we have projects that enhance our current features of the solutions, and then we have a long-term vision that include different technologies and research on these, like the integration of IoT and AI. This is some of the projects that we are part of. As I said, we are already part of the Digital Innovation Hub domain. We have set up our own, which is Hellenic Fiber iHub, and we follow the European Digital Innovation Hub, one of them that are recently established in Greece, and it's called Smart Attica, which is a part of AHEAD. This one that we co-founded along with Demokritos, the biggest research center in Greece. And due to fiber, mainly, we are also part of this new data space business alliance endeavor, where we try, along with GAIX and IDSA and BDVA iSpaces, we try to create interoperability, and we try to make data flow from one domain to another. In data spaces, we are also active as open call subgrantees in I4Trust was the project umbrella, where we deployed an agri-space, a data hub that gets information from the farmer that owns the data. He's the data owner always, or she, and but this data can be uptaken by the region or by an agronomist in order to give back some specialized services, agronomic services. So there is incentive for all these stakeholders to jump into this marketplace that was built on top of the data space. And we are also member of some national clusters in the area of industry. And also we are part of a national cluster of interoperable and holistic civil protection systems. So there we deploy our weather stations and IoT device in order to provide vulnerability assessment, early warning notifications, and reaction crisis management actions, especially in flooding, in phenomenon of flood, along with other partners, of course. And this is how we approach the R&D activities. We try to bring them in real market. So we have some initial offerings like the IoT hardware and the measurements that we get from the sensors, but then we partner up with additional partners in order to provide better analytics and other digital services. And of course, we have to go to the region, to the rural stakeholder, to the community, to the food cooperative, in order to discuss with them how this solution could be improved, or from the beginning, how we can co-design a specific solution for their needs. And this could be an example of how we could exploit the AURORAL interoperable data and brokerage middleware framework. So my initial thoughts was that we can bring some existing use cases in agriculture or in infrastructure domain, and start enhancing them by using some of the services that AURORAL provides, or we can work on the integration of eyewear with your vertical services or with your horizontal services. We want to partner with a nice community that you have already in place, and we will try to accelerate the impact of this new solution, either by pitching it in the real market, or moving a bit more into the validation part. I hope I respect your the time frame, and I'm here for any questions that you might have or any follow-up actions. Thank you very much once again for the invitation, and good luck to your project. Thank you.
Harris, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this quite extensive presentation. You really respected the 10 minutes, the instruction that I gave you. So it was perfect. I already see a raised hand. So I would give the floor to Tore already to see what does he has to ask you. Tore, go ahead.
It's just a general comment. I find this very, very interesting because from what I can see, you are addressing many of the gaps we have identified. You have a lot of use of IoT devices. You are monitoring climate. You are addressing big data and AI. So yeah, I find it very interesting, and I would like to see some of this into our role, if possible. Yes.
Thank you, Tore.
Yeah, indeed, Harris, you are also involved in a lot of somehow extended communities. So I'm sure that once perhaps we share the presentation with the audience, we can have a look, with some patience to everything you do, and for sure, extend a possible collaboration and see how to be involved in this project. Also, because Greece is not a country that is tackled within the AURORAL project, so this is also room for collaboration for sure. So
Sure.
thanks a lot. Well, there will be some time for discussions and questions after all the pitches. So in case you can type your feedback in the chat or wait for the session, for the discussion session to ask your questions or to address any kind of comment. So we are little bit delayed on the scheduled, not for you, Aris, it was as from the beginning, but it's normal. I would just like to perhaps switch the next two speakers, and I would like to give the floor to Zilda Mendes if she agrees, because I know she has a very busy schedule, and I don't want to, take too
No
much
problem.
of your time. Okay, thank you very much. So Zilda Mendes is the Deputy Director of InfoSaude CEFAR, which is the Center for Health Evaluation and Research in Portugal. So she will present some of the, let's say, use they have with IoT in the specific domain of health, and specifically in the monitoring of the flu as a use case. So Zilda, I can share the presentation for you, or if you are more comfortable, by sharing it yourself, you can go ahead at this point. Let me know.
Okay, I can share it.
Okay, please go ahead.
It's okay for you?
I cannot see it. I see your webcam on, but not the presentation.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, no, I don't see it.
I
can
will
share
try
it
it.
myself, otherwise.
I can
no
try
worries.
again.
Okay, yes.
It's okay?
Now,
No.
yes, perfect.
Okay, so as I've been told before, we try to develop a model that can predict influenza surveillance in community pharmacies. So there are several literature there where sales data can be used to predict some health events, such as gastrointestinal, respiratory diseases. They have used thermometer sales to estimate incidence of symptomatic diseases, or OTC sales to predict the volume of people going to urgency care. And since we are an association of pharmacies in Portugal, we have a large database, and we have almost 85% of all pharmacies in Portugal sending us data. So we have a large volume of data, not only from continental Portugal, but also from Madeira and Azores. We have a data warehouse where we have all the sales data from the pharmacies, and we try to develop a model that try to contribute to anticipate the peak and the intensity of influenza outbreaks. This model could enable public authorities to anticipate burden of visits to health centers and hospitals, and not only at the national level, but at municipality level. So how did we construct our model? So we have all the sales of OTCs and prescription medicines. We monitorize the sales over every season of flu from October to March. We identified an OTC basket that allows to better understand the dynamic of influenza. So with techniques of data mining, we tried to find a set of baskets and then elect the best one. And then we utilize the epidemiology model to predict the beginning, the length, and the intensity of influenza outbreaks in Portugal. We started this work studying the season of 2080 and 2090 because we had the influenza curve from the primary care, and to try to find the best basket to predict the curve or these outbreaks. We compared in this season, we compared our sales data, the high core index, which is the dark blue color, with the illness cases in primary care. So we start studying the curves and trying to identify the basket. And what we saw first in the axis is the week. So usually the beginning of influenza season started at week 40 and goes until December, January, February, and March. So when we were studying this basket, what we saw first was that our monitoring identified a threshold or passed a threshold before the illness case in primary care. So that was the first achievement. Then when we continue to study our curve, we can see that we anticipate 2 weeks the threshold of epidemic. So our curve still goes accompanying the monitoring of the illness at primary care. And after studying this season and the season after this one, we can consider that we have a robust index, and it can detect the peak, and also with an anticipation of 2 weeks. That part of the anticipation, it's the most important thing, because if we can, only with sales in the pharmacies, anticipate the peak, so the hospitals at the local level and the primary care units at the local level can anticipate the burden of people going and visit for flu and influenza. So this was the study that we did with this season to validate the model, and also we have done this at a local level. So as you see in this map, every day we can see all over the country how is the influenza going. So the green is the low level of influenza, and when we are running the model every day, we can see that influenza doesn't begin at all the region at the same time. So this kind of information can prepare at the local level where are the influenza going to be first, and then the municipalities can activate their plans for the burden of visits at the local level. So this was the test and the validation of the model, and then we can see how it's going this season. So we have a partnership with the National Association of Public Health Physicians, and every week we publish at their site how it's going the flu of the season, and if you have curiosity to see, this is the season that we are now going. So we could see that the epidemic curve started at week 45, and then we have a peak at week 52, which is at the end of the year, December from January. We can also see that this curve, it's not the same in continent and in Azores and Madeira. So in continent, this season, we have reached, or we have passed the threshold earlier than the other weeks. We had a peak here on week 52, 53 in the beginning of January, and now it's decreasing. Also, we can see that in Madeira, and this graph here above, and Açores, the epidemic curve was different from the continent. So it starts early with a peak in Azores, and then we have another peak here. And in Madeira, we have a peak on week 51. So, and this peak of OTC sales can predict the burden of visits that the centers, the unit, the health centers and hospitals 2 weeks before. So municipalities can arrange and schedule the visits. So although we can see that, for example, in this season, until November, there was no flu at all. Then in December, it started the flu in the north and a little bit in the Alentejo here. And then it vanished again. So this year, the flu season started in the north and in Alentejo, and it was only a slight peak of influenza. Also, we have here in this dashboard at the site of the public health physicians, we have here the curves for the 3 main regions in Portugal, which is North, Center, Lisbon, Alentejo, and Algarve, so that they can see what is going on in their region, but in 5 micro regions. But we have also an index more detailed for the counties, and we can have data on the municipalities. So if we are going to, we want to see, for example, in Castelo Branco, we can see what is happening in every municipalities of Castelo Branco. And if we want to see in Alentejo, for example, the region of Évora, we can see what is going on in the region of Évora in every municipalities. So this was our project, and we are still monitoring that, because as you may know, in Portugal this week, it's the most cold week for a few years. So maybe that curves will grow up again, and we have another peak of flu. So that's all for our presentation. It's an example of how we monitorize this flu influenza.
Yeah, Zilda, thanks a lot. Actually, it shows really good, like the potential of the use of big data, especially in the healthcare sector, when it comes also to risk reduction and risk anticipation, which we have seen it's quite crucial when it comes to maybe other kind of flus that are somehow worse for the community. And it's also quite interesting that you managed to divide the data as well according to the different municipalities, because here in this project, indeed, we are tackling rural areas. So it's also important to have the overview of the region itself, of the local municipality itself, but it's also very good that you managed to then have have like an overview at the country level. So this is really shows the potential of the use of big data in the healthcare sector. And so thank you very much for this presentation.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
sure it can be replicated also in other countries for sure. And in case anyone has perhaps questions on the use of data, or more technical questions on that, I think you can type it in the chat, and then I will share, Zilda, your presentation with the audience, so you can also write over there your contacts, or emails that the partners can contact to understand more from also the technology point of view, the
Yes.
technical point of view. This is really a great project. Congratulations for that.
Yeah, I know that other countries have this kind of surveillance, because I work with colleagues from another countries, and they have this kind of surveillance, for example, in France, I think.
Mhm.
But if we want to work together in other countries to see how we construct the baskets and so on, I'm totally available. So I can share my email here in the chat, and
yes, of course,
it would be good.
Go ahead in sharing it in the chat, and then I will also share the presentation, so all the partners can check it with more calm and time, and they can contact you, let's say, separately. So thank you very much. I would now give the floor to the third company presenting today. So it's Orchestra City by Martel Innovate, and it will be presented by Dr. Albert Sauber. He is the director of Martel BV. Thank you for joining us today, and sorry for this little change in the order. But now the floor is yours, and all the time to share the presentation, and yes, share with us the information about Orchestra City and Martel. Thanks.
Thank you, Alessandra. I'm happy to do so. The only thing is I can't share my screen. Maybe I do not have the rights, or... No, I don't hear you anymore as well.
You are muted, Alessandra. You are muted.
Yes. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Let me try, but you should have the right from the settings. So I will just try to change you to attendees, and then to put you back as presenter. Perhaps it works.
Alessandra, I think you are sharing your screen. So.
No.
No.
Someone is sharing their screen.
I think it's perhaps
I think Zilda is still Zilda is still sharing.
Albert, you might want to exit and re-enter the meeting, because I don't have for the system you are a presenter. So
now it should work. Now I think.
You would like to try it again?
Does not even. I will just quickly jump out, re-enter.
Okay, thanks.
Make
Sorry
sure
about
that I have the right link here.
Or Albert, if you send me over Skype the link, this is Amrita, by the way, from Martel. So if you send over Skype, I can share it from my side.
That's fine, Amrita. I will do that. That makes things more easy for us.
Okay.
For me.
Sorry for this, Alessandra. It should be with you, Amrita. But in the meantime, when Amrita is just opening up the slides, we can kick this off and not create another delay here. Well, Marcus has left us, but I want to thank him for his kind words at the opening of this presentation, this meeting. When we look at what, as Martel, what we're looking on is to find and support the underlying technologies needed to create these solutions for smart communities, whether it's rural or cities or based on a territory with many villages. There is a link and an interconnection between all this. So the one thing that we think is important is the interoperability and the creation of what we call a connected model, where cities or rural areas or communities or villages can work together, and they need to work together. You can imagine if a larger city in the region starts deploying a new mode of transportation, new rulings on that, it directly impacts the rural areas, because these people rely on the city for mobility services, education, care, work, and in most cases also the economy. So there is a direct interlink between cities and rural areas. Did you find the slides, Amrita? Yep, you're presenting. This is good. Thank you. So if we look at what we do, we call this Orchestra Cities. It's based on the results of the program at the time called Orchestra Cities, and we're further developing this. If we can go to the next slide, Amrita, then this is the main concern: connect the devices, but connect the citizens and connect the communities, as I mentioned. So the devices are there. And in the previous presentations, word a few times that the aging population are not digital savvy. That these are my words, but let's not forget the smartphones we are using today are designed and developed by what we today call the aging community. So there's still, certainly in the rural areas, there's still a big gap that we need to close, but we should not forget this gap is closing on two sides. So let's work from the assumption that we need and we have to implement digital services anyway. Next slide, please. Because in the end, what we need is information, and information is based on the data we can capture. So where data has value for different many purposes, we see that in government side, the data is locked up in administration since Napoleon, and it's in that definition because of all types of regulations and rules, and it is not easy to share and open. That's one challenge with digitalization and digital transformation in government business. We open up that side of the data, and we want to combine it with more real-time data that we have from different sources, as was shown in the presentation on Portugal. We need that information to be able to provide more insights on what's happening and make the data shareable. Next slide, please. But it also means that we have to come to a unified space. And here Harris touched on the thing that we are working on very heavily with the Fiber Foundation. We are a board member of the Fiber Foundation representing all the gold members. The most important thing here is that the technology is there, but you also need the data models. And the context broker is a building block that's interchangeable. The Orion context broker is a community connecting Europe facilities building blocks, but the data models to support all the implementations of new functions are a key to the success, and the Fiber Foundation is really building on that, together with the Open Edge of Smart Cities, where we define the interoperability mechanisms to allow you to interchange solutions and impacts of what can be done in Greece, can also be working in France, based on the underlying definitions to set the standards, and to adhere to the local rulings and regulations and potentially laws on how to deal with data. Now, the next slide, please. But that means if we build on the data, we can start building on who are we going to serve with that. And yes, social inclusion, the digital divide that we still see needs to be closed. And specifically for rural areas, this is what we see. And we have to think of creating and supporting processes, what I would sometimes address to as a non-city hall organization, where all the processes are somewhat digital and supported with another organization type. You can imagine with some small communities that we worked with, they started working from the idea there was no city hall. the people working for the community, for the local government, had a different set of tasks. If they would go out to a rural area to provide services or whatever, application for health support, application for an identity, so passport renewal, whatever, or maybe they also could do different things while they're on the way in the rural area and act as the mobile city hall. Be aware, that means all the processes come back to a small group of people, and security and data access control is way more important because it tends to impact a risk on our, or poses a risk on our privacy. Next slide, please, Amrita. So, but that also means that building on this, you need to allow citizens in the business to take part of this co-creation process. And for this, we have created some toolkits simply built on Lego, where you have the interaction of this is how we generate the data, this is how you see the data, this is how other people can access and reuse the data. So to make people aware in doing by showing how it works and what the data quality could look like. It doesn't mean that with this we create an implementation of a new function, but you can show the people what we can do and how we can address the data and how it's processed. I'm processing of the data. I'm making a small sidestep here. Harris touched on that with the edge boxes in a separate project that we are currently running for the EC. We are working on a model to operate the continuum between these IoT devices. Could be a smartwatch, could be any sensor in your home, could be any sensor in an agricultural field, with these edge boxes to the cloud, because taking control of the data means taking also control on the underlying infrastructure and secure that. Just as a note in FluidOS, there's going to be options to work on this as well in integrating what was discussed here with the underlying infrastructure. Next slide, please, Amrita. So this means Augustus Cities as a platform design. It's not a platform that you can easily roll out. It's a design on how to work on. The most common elements here are important. It's open source, so we share it. It's based on open APIs, NGI, LD, NGSI version 2. These are supported based on the Fiber architecture. We work on the open data models, also with OAX and Fiber. But most important, and even more important than open source, is the open standards, the interoperability mechanisms defining the type of functions that we build on it, so we can exchange not just the results of the data that we capture, but also the function that we've based on it. It is multidimensional, so we build different new items that were not existing in the open source libraries of the Fiber Foundation or in any other open source library, like Quantum Leap, an important building block to time-lapse data from different sources with different data qualities and different data definitions to make that work. But it also comes with securing data. Anubis will be released soon, where the technology layer, we can set the data policies at the source, so you can reuse the data over different platforms, being aware of the privacy restrictions and being aware of the quality of the data. Because in the end, the services that you build on top are always relying on the quality of the data that you are using. That means it has to be modular and scalable, because a small community has to be served at the same level as a larger city or an industry plant or a function, a vertical function in a territory like mobility or public transportation. It's based on the design that it's multi-tenant in the technical word. So we share data and metrics among cities, but we also share the data across the cities or across the communities where and when needed. That allows also joint development, joint creation, joint definition, and cost sharing of technologies for technology across the communities. And based on it, okay, we've seen that real-time monitoring, but monitoring is always in hindsight. This is what has been done. If we can use the data platform and combine it with a local digital twin or any model that will help us to simulate impact of suggested changes before you implement them, that allows you to create a model that is more predictive, even if it's not the real change, but you start predicting based on the outcomes and the volumes of the data you have, using analytic tooling, AI, machine learning, and that's helping not just to look at it and expect what's happening, but to predict, and specifically on traffic, air quality, for people suffering from any kind of respiratory diseases. Air quality predictions are more and more important to do. As with city redesign at the moment, heat maps, as we're working on with some digital twin companies. Next slide, please. So open is open standards, open data, opening data, and open APIs to build jointly the solutions for communities, territories, rural areas to work on this. And here is where new technologies come in. And drones were mentioned in the beginning. For us, it's just a mobile sensor, but it's a sensor that can perform different tasks. And one of the projects that we see now, based on the data, working with a drone company here, is where, and specifically for rural areas, where medication needs to be delivered to a family, hospitals are on a longer distance, more and more, meaning that family or relatives has to go to hospital to pick up the medication. Now, using drones, medication can be dropped at the nearest family doctor's position, or maybe at some point be dropped at the location of the patient. So there's no delay when medication is needed very urgently, without having stacks of medication everywhere and reduce costs on that. So that's a project that we can work on, but it's also based, again, it's using the data, securing the data, having the open standards, making it available and interact, using a technology to connect the hospital to the patient by using a drone in this case. Next slide, please. So important for the community of people working on solutions to serve citizens, to serve governments, to provide services on verticals, mobility, health, tourism. I will come to that. Is this architecture where we connect different items. So what Mattel is focusing on is to have a secure, trusted, and reliable connection of any type of device to a network through an IoT agent. This IoT agent is part of the FireWare reference architecture, and it's open source shared by FireWare. I mentioned time series. Quantum Leap is a development by Mattel that we share open source because it's so important to use data from different sets and make it visible so you can use it. And there will be Anubis added to this stack very soon, that we can secure data and secure privacy of people in the field. We will continue to do this working with Fiverr in the Open Edge Smart City. So this next slide then, please, Amrita. And then please the next slide. It's the end. There's one thing on tourism, the island approach. It's very important to find a unique element for tourism. And working with Svingal in Ireland, we created the idea of collecting data on the environment, collecting data on social and cultural heritage, providing entrepreneurs the option to come up with a touristic, well, let's call that attraction or model, to support young families to live in a rural area and understand how living close with nature will help you to adapt to a more eco-friendly lifestyle, because they can see, based on the daily data they capture, how they've changed their local impact, their family impact on the environment. So tourism, it can be beaches and enjoyment, but it can also be education. And exactly to find for rural areas a new model for tourism could be this education model for eco-friendly living styles. So that's as an afterburner. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Cybers. This was really an interesting presentation of what you do at Martel Innovate with this Orchestra City, and I see that the ambitions are quite aligned with also with the AURORAL project, as you stress the importance of interoperability and the importance of having open data sets to be used and reused for different purposes. So I would invite the audience actually to keep the questions for later, because I would like to give the floor to the last speaker super quickly, because he mentioned me that he's not going to stay for the whole presentation. I'm really sorry, Mr. Tadas Kubilius. He is director of the Smart Energy Digital Innovation Hub. I invited him to indeed present some of use cases and on the use also of data in this domain. He will share anyway the presentation, but it's just really to give him the floor for a couple of words. Thank you, and sorry for the delay in the schedule.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Just short question. Can you see the presentation that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Good, because today we had some technical difficulties to present. Well, anyways, my name is Tadas Kubilius. I'm director of Smart Energy Digital Innovation Hub based in Lithuania, Vilnius, our capital. We just started actually our activities, participate actively in this field last year, November. So basically what we do, we are like a one-stop shop for subjects like academias, public institutions, and SME businesses, and also larger companies as well. And to be a mediator or epicenter to connect them together in order to bring more digitalization technologies, modern technologies to test before to invest into technologies that necessary of testing in the laboratories and so forth and so on. But we're also focusing on mostly on solar and wind energy, data management, smart cities, which is one of the hot topics now at the moment in Lithuania, and we're actively also participating in it, having sequent events in our municipalities every month, basically trying to connect them into one platform to have a database of requested projects towards decarbonization of their buildings, transports, and energy sectors. So these are the main sectors that we're working on at the moment. Of course, not to forget to mention that we also demonstrate some technologies within our partners network, because at the moment we already have 30 partners from different subjects, as I mentioned, from public institutions, from academia, institutes, universities, colleges, and also private companies. So we can suggest to our partners and to newcomer members to have a test, let's say demo workshops to see how the technologies works and so forth and so on. So and our business model is basically through our key partners to have activities in order to develop more modern technologies and integration of them into the companies. Of course, digital innovation development and increase competitive advantages within the EU market. Our resources is our network, basically. So we are also part of bigger digital innovation hub, which is called ID. It's connected with the agro and energy sectors, and it's working within all European Union. And we want to bring values to our members with helping them to find green investments for the projects, to administrate and support within the projects, allow more R&D activities within the companies, and to build sort of an ecosystem focused on green technologies. So now, as I was talking a lot about our members, about the subjects that we're working with. So we kind of divided our activities within four main domains. It's the public initiatives that we're working now with the green municipalities or towards green municipalities, EU-funded projects, PPP projects, public partnership projects, and commercial projects. And in the near future, within 2 years, we're focusing our activities towards more commercial projects to have with the decarbonization fund that we are already establishing, and to leave public initiatives for the municipalities and PPP projects working sustainably by itself. So this is our kind of let's say, sort of a business timeline. We're starting with PPP projects and Horizon and public projects funded by government. We consult SMEs, public institutions with the digital and other topics, digitalization and other topics, working on decarbonization of various fields. And then we are sort of stepping up with our decarbonization fund, that we're bringing all the industry companies into one fund that they can invest for a certain amount of time with certain amount of money. And this investments will be focused on huge decarbonization funds within the energy and transportation projects in the regions. And later on, we will enable, or we already starting enable, but at the larger scale, we will enable the IoT and big data projects towards the data management and supporting intelligence services. A short project timeline that we're working with. So as I mentioned, EDIC, which is the European network consortium here, Green Municipality Project, Decarbonization Fund, and then later on Intelligent Data Transportation Project connected only on data analysis and monitoring. Benefits for members, I will leave that for you to get to know on the slides when when you will receive it. So once again, my name is Tadas Kubilius. I'm a director of the Digital Innovation Hub. Sorry for being so short and talking so fast, but I really need to go to another meeting. I will leave the slides to Alessandra, and I hope we'll have a good discussion afterwards. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Tadas. I'm really sorry for the delay in the schedule, but I think you managed to make your point, and I will share, as you said, the presentations afterwards. So thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye. Hi. So we don't have much time, but I would really like to open the floor to questions, comments, remarks, especially, for instance, from AURORAL partners to the speakers, but also perhaps if the external speakers have some, specific questions to the AURORAL partners about the middleware, and about these all these points that we touched upon. I would have a question, which is mainly for Harris and Albert, but of course Zilda is also welcome to reply to this. I would just like to know whether you somehow agree with the innovation gaps that we have identified within the project. So are you encountering somehow the same lack of best practice examples in the domains that we presented? And another question is on data and availability of data, because one issue that I often hear, especially within the work of the focus group smart communities, is that sometimes it's not easy to get access indeed to this data. And we know that open data are actually crucial if we want to build a true European and fast, let's say, digital transformation of our communities. So I would like to know which is the domain, let's say, where you struggle the most to find available data for your work. These are my questions, but of course the floor is open to also everyone to make their own questions or comments. Thank you.
Can I address
Of course,
this?
yes.
Thank you, Alessandra. of course, I need some time to reflect on the information that you previously said in terms of gaps identification. But I can recall that in smart farming domain, it was mentioned that there is a gap in the policy part, and if I'm not mistaken, this was translated into gaps in the terms and conditions of the data, who owns the data, who uses the data, who accesses the data. I think these issues are heavily discussed, let's say, and I believe that there is now a common ground of what happening in terms of data. So I would slightly disagree that this is a gap, but yeah, this is an issue still under discussion. But I think there's some considerable progress made towards this. There are some code of contacts. There are some proposals from the manufacturers of the machineries for farming, and as a technology provider and as a company that directly reaches farmers, cooperatives, etc. I think they understand. They want to own things. They want to own things, and this is what is be done. So they understand that the data are theirs, but they also understand that we need, as a technology provider, we need this data in order to provide them some services, either in the value in the core of the value offering of the product. So these are some visualizations, these are some predictions, things like that. So we must access this data. We have to access this data in order to provide the services. And of course, we need access to this data in order to proactively maintain the devices, maintain the operational setup and everything. So I think this is well accepted by the end users. And in order to do so, as a company, we provide a GDPR waiver with specific terms and conditions on why are we accessing this data, what we can do with this data. So this document also touches some ethical things, let's say, apart from the technical ones. And yeah, I don't see a gap on this in terms of smart industry. I totally agree that some implementations in even in low tech industries or in medium tech industries are start to happening, but these data indeed are not reaching the territory, the proximity, let's say the regions. I make a stop in order for Albert or someone else to talk, and yeah, I can continue.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, well, thanks a lot. Actually, this is also very interesting, even for the work of the association I represent here, because being in Brussels, we are quite much involved in the policy discussions, especially on the Data Act and everything that related to digital. So this is actually quite important takes that I will that I will also keep for myself and probably contact you, like for other for other things. So actually, thank you a lot for sharing this. And I guess that we would need like an event on how to use data, better use data for from the industrial sector to other domains. Albert, please. I see. Yes.
Yes, I opened my mic because I think Harris.
Of course.
It's. But I have a bit of a different take on this. Where, say, 10 years ago, we had a huge discussion on open data. Everything should be open. We now, in the time that we understand that open data is losing value, it's more about how to have open technology to share and maybe capitalize on data, because that would allow, specifically in rural areas where there's less interest of in making an investment, where you can say, all companies that provide services, well, Harris is a good example on agriculture. If you extend that type of sensoring, you do, you would be maybe the provider of the data, but you need to have some feedback on the investment or the technology put up to capture that data and how you want to use it. It all is depending on the type of data. If it's environmental monitoring, there are many different cases. Some of the data is being published as open data. But if you share the infrastructure and you allow through your infrastructure to also capture data that's more of a household level or maybe personal level, security comes more eminent. But here's where a different open, I sometimes refer to it as an open source business model, a shared business model on the data. So that's not open data, but it's open standards to making security and an open infrastructure where you can build a new business model more easily, creating more value based on the data you can capture. And here again, most investors are interested in networking for cities and networking and extending services based on data you can capture, where rural areas are more and more left out. I lived in America, just go in a bit of detail here, where you see that on huge farms, they have very good satellite connections, but no internet connections through cable or wireless networks, because it's simply not there. The AT&Ts of the world are not interested to invest in rural areas in northern Indiana. So kids go to school, do the homework, climb on a tractor and connect through the satellite with the school. This is not a way that we can create a data services-based model. So here's the challenge on how to build this open business models for rural areas. My contribution, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Albert. This is also a very interesting take and point of view. And actually, I really appreciate the challenge, and the difference, point of view. This is why we are having these discussions to understand really what is going on, let's say, in different countries, and also which are the different opinions of technology providers. So this is actually quite interesting. And the discussion on data is indeed it's indeed quite extended, not only here in Brussels, let's say at policy level, but also in the context of smart communities, specifically, like now there is a lot of going on for the preparatory action to create a data space for smart communities. So there's really a lot of inputs, requests, and a lot of stakeholder consultations going on. So if you're interested in giving your own opinion on that, I can quickly follow up with you like separately, since this is something we do at the Digital SME here in Brussels. So thank you very much actually for sharing these two different opinions. I would like to really go on and challenge you with other questions, but I think I would like to give the floor to other speakers if they have questions, if they have remarks or anything to add. It's now or never. So you can raise your hand or just take the floor directly if you have something to add to this. No? Okay. I don't see any raised hand. It's 12:30, so actually we managed to finish timely. I would like to thank all the speakers for being here and for taking the time to introduce their what they do, their business, and their approach to this big data sharing and big data processing, and also how they see the development of smart cities and smart communities. So I hope you equally enjoyed the part on the AURORAL gaps, and also on the small information we gave on what we are doing in the AURORAL project. As I mentioned at the beginning, these gaps will be addressed through open calls at later stage. So this is already like somehow an introduction to what the middleware is and which are more or less the innovations that we are going to call for. Thank you also to all the participants for remaining connected 2 hours. I know it's a long time, especially when it's a dense of information. So really thank you for your attention. And I just shared in the chat another event that we are organizing also in the context of focus group smart communities. Tomorrow there will be an event on public procurement organized by Digital SME. One of the AURORAL partner, Elliott Cloud, namely, will also be present there as a speaker to talk about their experience with procurement and also in the project itself. So if you're interested, you can register by accessing it, the link pasted in the chat. For the rest, yes, I just want to say thank you once again. We will share the presentations with the audience, and we will prepare a follow-up report that we will publish on the website, so it can be always reachable, and your contact will be there for anyone interested, in following up. But I'm sure there will be follow-up because you're also involved in many projects, and one of the key tasks of projects is to seek for collaborations with other organizations as such. So I'm really sure that we are going to continue these interesting discussions that we started today. Thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon and talk soon. Bye everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kalimera. Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.